Well, I guess we'll just kick it off. Welcome to the third water cooler. This is edited and recorded off company time. Today I'm with Holly, and James is over in the corner, just kind of spectating. But I'm so happy to finally get to meet you. You know, one of the big cheeses. I just met Chris a little while ago, and then James is there,
I'm sorry.
just watching in the corner. But they wanted me to start off the interview just by asking, about your time in Toronto, Vancouver.
Well, I managed restaurants for years. So I managed a restaurant called The Keg, and I started managing when I was 21, I think. I think I was 21, and yeah, I was the youngest manager in the history of the kegs. The keg is they do have some kegs in the States. They've got one at Desert Ridge, but in Canada it's huge. We have so many kegs. There's like 100 and something kegs across Canada. And yeah, I was the youngest general manager ever. And I was one of 3 females. It was like a definite boys club to be a part of. And I learned a lot. And I was also the only manager ever to go and do my my training. So you do 3 months of like intensive training.
Mm-hmm.
I was the only manager ever that went back to their keg that they originated from, like their home their home store, because it's difficult for people to manage their peers, but they apparently thought I could do it, and I did. And everybody, everyone that I managed was older than me, which I thought would be kind of awkward, but it wasn't. And yeah, it was really good. But yeah, then I started working at a restaurant called Carnero's, and I was there for 10 years, and it was amazing. And I got to meet a lot of famous people, People always ask me, and I always there's so many that I kind of forget, but I got to meet, I got to meet so many. Jensen Ackles. I got to meet, there was Arnold Schwarzenegger and his son Patrick Schwarzenegger. They came in one day. I got to meet them. He's very short. I was very surprised.
Like even shorter than us.
He's short. He's a small person. I towered over him. And God, Bono was in there. Robin Williams, right before he passed away, was in there.
Oh no.
Liam Neeson, I've served him multiple times, and that man is enormous. His hands are huge. He is a big man. He was in there so many times. Owen Wilson, Anne Hash, Nickelback would go in there a lot. Obviously, tons of hockey players, because hockey's really big to us in Canada. I don't know.
I'd imagine. Yeah. It's only one of the stereotypes.
It is, and it's a true stereotype, because it's the only thing that I like to watch is hockey. I love my hockey. If you wanted to torture me, you'd sit me down and make me watch football. I'd probably stab my eyes out or fall asleep in absolute boredom. It was really cute, actually. I was serving, because I have a part-time job serving in a restaurant called the Burley Hound in Prescott, and I was serving this older gentleman a couple of weeks ago, and he was absolutely adorable. He was 86 years old, and they asked me where I was from.
It's almost as old as your dad, James.
And he asked me where I was from, and I said Vancouver, and then he asked me if I speak French, and then he started speaking to me in French, and his French was fantastic, and I was kind of surprised I could actually understand him, because some people, when they speak, it's difficult to understand them, because everyone speaks a little bit differently. But he was able to tell me in French, and I could understand it. I already told James the story. That he actually, he was stationed in the military. He was stationed in Paris for 10 years. And he also told me that he went to boarding school in Switzerland. So he was a really interesting old fellow, and he just thought I was the bee's knees, because I could speak to him in French. So it was really cute, because I would just be like, oh, there's your, un verre de vin, rosé. And he just thought it was the sweetest thing. It was really cute.
Do you have any more of those just eccentric people that you've served? Because you've been in the restaurant industry for a good minute.
Oh
And so,
goodness.
does anybody come to mind besides the famous people, besides
I
the
have
Nickelbacks and Owen Wilsons?
so many odd stories. I like some of the kegs that I worked at. There was this one keg that I worked at in New Westminster, and it wasn't a very good area. And I honestly would call the police on every single day. I'd call the RCMP. I'd be like, "Hey, it's Holly from the New Westminster keg. It's this time of day. Come here." But it was people were really smart because like we would have, there's people that would come in that were homeless, and you can't necessarily judge a book by the cover. Like you can't just say, I'm not going to welcome you in just because of the way that they look.
Mm-hmm.
So they would come in and then have a nice dinner and maybe like, and never like anything very extravagant. Like they would just have a nice dinner and a couple beers or a glass of wine, and at the end they'd be like, okay, I can't pay my bill, like you can call the police now. So I would call the police and they would come and they would take them to jail for the evening, and they'd get a warm bed to sleep in, or they'd be inside, and then they'd get breakfast in the morning and they would be let go. It was honestly genius. I thought it was absolutely genius of them to do that, but it's yeah, it would happen quite a bit at that keg. But yeah, there was a shooting at one of my kegs, which is not that common in Canada. But
And you were there, like, as the bullets are flying by?
yeah, it was crazy. It was on a Monday night, and I was the only manager because usually, depending on what day of the week, like if it was a Friday or Saturday night, we'd have all four managers. And this is when I was like, I was young. I was a service manager. It was like probably my first year managing, and there was we have in certain parts. There's like we do have like these there's like gangs, I guess, and these guys, there was a party of 10 come in and they were just terrible to my server. And so I just told the server, I'm like, you don't deserve to be treated this way. I'm gonna take it from here. I was always very big on that. And so I just went up to them and I asked them, all of their food was ready. It was all in the pass through, it was all there, all ready to go out. And I just went up to them and I just said, okay, gentlemen, I'm gonna get you to pay for your drinks that you've consumed, and I'm gonna ask you to leave. And they gave me a bit of a hard time. It was weird because there was only one gentleman that was allowed to speak to me, and it was kind of hard not to laugh a little bit as well because there's an older gentleman beside him drinking like the worst bottle of wine that we had on the menu, like straight from the bottle. Like he's just trying to like chug it because I'm kicking them out. It was really, and it was an old man too. It was hilarious. And so I kicked them out, and they went out front, and they must have been it was definitely targeted because they think that there was somebody waiting in the parking lot, and they drove by and they shot the guy that I was talking to, the guy that was giving me a hard time that I was kicking them out. He was the one that got shot. Then they all came running back inside for cover and left their poor friend out front that was shot just to bleed to death, which I thought was terrible.
And his ghost still haunts the restaurant to this day.
It was right. It was crazy. And so they came in and like it was very odd. Like I do believe that sometimes the universe does look out for you, because the one spot at that time of night I normally would be eating, it was called table 13. I would normally be eating at table 13. I'd eat my chicken fajitas. I'd always eat my dinner at the same table, and that's where the bullets went through. So like I had literally just kicked them out and I was gonna sit down and eat. I went to the back to wash my hands, and then I came out front, and this is like they're all screaming my name and like my staff, and I was like, oh my god, what's going on? Like I literally had gone to the back for like 2 seconds, and they'd all come running back inside, and I had to call. I got someone to call 911. I had to call my boss, and he had to drive out, and there's also like the regional manager had to drive out, and it was crazy. Like all the cops, the media showed up so fast. Every single news station was there. It was just, we had to lock down the restaurant. Nobody was allowed to leave. They had dogs in there. They were looking for the weapon. They were convinced too that perhaps one of them, like one of the guys had killed him. It was just nuts. And and then I had to tell my statement so many times. And me and my boss and my boss's boss, we sat there, we just drank wine, and I'm like shaking. And then by the time I had to tell my statement again, by that time I'd had probably too much wine. It was quite humorous. I can't imagine what I sounded like. But yeah, there was some crazy, that was probably one of the craziest. Was that shooting for me, for sure.
And what do you do after just a night like that? You know, like after the
Right.
cops go home, it's all,
Yeah.
you know, it's finally settling down. You put on Friends or something,
I know,
or
right?
you just get some more wine. How do you
Just
come
watch some
down?
cartoons. Yeah, it was nuts. But I got really good at being able to see when things would escalate. Like I had the ability to look at a situation, and I knew if it was going to escalate. It was the weirdest thing. It was when I was in Kelowna. I was with a boyfriend of mine, and we were out for dinner, and there was a group of 8 guys eating at this table, and I said to him, I'm like, something's gonna go wrong. There's something bad is gonna happen. We're gonna be calling the cops.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, how do you, they're fine. They're all eating. They're all getting along. Nothing's wrong. And I'm like, trust me. Sure enough, I kid you not, within 30 minutes, they threw chairs down. They were at each other's throats. And this poor, young, sweet little girl was the only manager there. And I was like, I got you. I didn't even, this is a totally different restaurant. I did not work at this restaurant. I didn't know anybody in this restaurant. I just felt so bad for her. And I'm like, don't worry, I've got this. You go call the police, and I'm going to try to get them out of the restaurant, and I'm going to deal with this. I've got your back. It's
That's
okay.
incredible. I've seen this before. Let me take
know.
over.
It was so funny. My boyfriend was so impressed with me that I was able to be able to see that was going to happen. It was hilarious. But yeah, I saw I had some guy once try to stab me with a fork.
Gravy.
It was so funny. It was so funny.
People are so violent, and just whenever it comes to food, I haven't worked in a restaurant. I worked in a fast food place, but I've had people just throw their hot cheese on me or their salsa cups.
Really?
There was this dude who walked up to my walk-up window one time. He was all beef and jacked, and there was a giant game, KU against probably K-State. That's the rivalry out there. And this dude was just all hyped up for whatever reason. I couldn't hear him, and I asked him to repeat himself a couple times. And I guess on the third time, he was like, I'm done with this. So he tries to pull me through the window, and I'm just there. He has my shoulder, and I'm just trying to scoot away. The cooks are running over because they're trying to get my back. They have their little spatulas. They're banging all this stuff, making all this kind of noise, and the dude just eventually leaves.
See, I think it's hard in a restaurant too, because it's when alcohol's involved, because that's a lot of, when you have a lot of problems with people that drink alcohol and become crazy. It's that's unfortunate.
Well, we were right across from a bar too, and it was I worked the night shift, so whenever the bar would close at 2 o'clock, they would come over at 3 or whenever we closed, and it would just be this whole thing. I've had people be so drunk in the drive-through that they would just fall asleep, and they wouldn't move. They'd hold up the entire line, and we just have to figure this out. Well, this guy isn't moving, and then maybe he wakes up when we're trying to move him, and then they take out a curb or something. It was a college town too, so
Crazy.
whenever anything significant happened, when what's it called? The Chiefs won the Super Bowl. They tore up downtown. They were taking out lampposts. There was just all these college kids just rampaging up and down the streets. There was glass being broken. It was a scene.
I never understood that. Something happens and people oh, let's go and rob all these stores and break their windows. It doesn't make any sense to me.
It's that electricity in the air. The same air you're probably feeling when you're going to restaurants and you're getting a bad vibe about 8 people at
Right?
It is something about it. You can smell it.
It's so funny because I remember I honestly I'll tell people that I was so shy. I was such a shy kid. I was very introverted, And people that know me now, they just don't believe me. But it's true. I swear that like when I started working at the keg when I was a teenager, because I started as a busser, and then I work your way up to a hostess, and all that sort of thing. I swear I didn't start speaking until I was 17 years old. Like that's when I started to come out of my shell a bit, and when I started managing a restaurant, it was really intimidating and terrifying to go up to tables that you have to go and apologize to, or you have to speak to, and like people, they can be aggressive sometimes, and it really like it gets your heart racing.
Yeah.
But after you do it so many times, like it does become so much easier, and you just stop putting up with stuff. Like I remember when I was the general manager at that keg in Kelowna, I remember I just got to that keg, so nobody really knew me yet. And I went up, there was a teacher that used to come in, he was a teacher at the high school, and he used to come into that keg all the time, and he would sit there and he'd grade his papers and he'd drink a bottle of wine, and he was awful to the servers, like awful. He'd only be served by a male server. He wouldn't be served by a female. He was just nasty. He was so nasty. And I remember the first time that I met him, and he was just being awful. He was being awful to the server. And I was like, why do you guys put up with this? I don't understand. So I just went over to him and I was like, good evening, sir. Nice to meet you. I'm going to ask you to leave my restaurant, and I never want you to return. I banned him from the restaurant. And everyone just thought I was like, once again, like they're like, oh, that's amazing. Like no one else has ever done that before. And I'm like, why would you allow somebody in your restaurant that's going to treat your staff terribly? Like I would never let someone treat my staff terribly, ever. So I banned him. And that was, once again, I had to call the cops that time because he refused to leave. He's like, I'm going to finish my bottle of wine and leave. And I'm like, no, that's not how this works. This is a licensed establishment. If I ask you to leave, you have to leave. And he didn't believe me, so I called the cops. The cops came. The cop was like, she's right. Like,
oh, thank goodness it was a female cop too.
Oh yeah, no,
that's amazing.
Right. That would have been hilarious, because obviously he didn't like women. And the cop was like, she's right. Exactly what she said. Like, you must leave. But it's funny because I found out after, because Kelowna's a smaller town, I found out after that same teacher at this high school, I'm like, I feel sorry for his students, for starters. I found out that he was already banned from most of the restaurants in all of Kelowna.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like,
this man has to go to McDonald's now.
Jeez,
he can only go to Burger King.
Yeah, it was so funny. But yeah, that was like sort of the introduction for my staff to me. And they thought I was great, obviously, because I was like, no, why would you put up with that?
No, definitely. Well, it definitely helped create the person you are today. But,
I guess so, right?
But I just wanted to say thank you for letting us, giving us an insight into who Holly is, helps paint a better picture for me and the entire team. And I'm sure, everybody's going to be excited to hear about this. And I know there are a couple horse girls on the team that are going to love, that part about just what you did and your background with all those horses. Yeah, totally.
I'm always trying to find someone that has a horse that I can ride. Or I try to terrorize everybody to come up and hike with me. But Ty comes and hikes with me. James needs to come and hike with me. Eventually.
Well, you can extend the invitation to anybody who's listening.
Yeah, totally.
Anybody.
Everyone's welcome. I always invite people to come to Prescott, especially in the summertime. It's so much nicer than Phoenix.
But that'll be all for today's episode, though. Thank you again, Holly, for agreeing to sit down. I appreciate you taking time and talking. You're so easy to talk to. So far,
so awkward.
You're not awkward at all. You've just been going, and that's what we love.
I know.
No, you're totally fine.
I'll just say whatever. So you got some good stories for me.
Yeah. But no, then that's the episode. This is all edited and recorded off company time. But thank you guys for listening.